good to have the opportunity to speak to you once again, as I'd like to follow up on the message I brought last time about the return of Jesus. And what I'd like to do today is to follow up in Matthew's Gospel. Last time we read the first 15 verses or so, and today we'd read the next passage because the passage we're going to read gives us the events immediately preceding his return and the fact and experience of his actual return to this earth, to the skies. So let's read the passages together. Verse 15 of chapter 24. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the roof of his house go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great distress unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive, but for the sake of the elect those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it, for false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and miracles to deceive even the elect, if that were possible. See, I have told you ahead of time. So if anyone tells you, there he is out in the desert, do not go out, or here he is in the inner room, do not believe it. For as the lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the nations of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky, with great power and glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. And then to follow on from that, to tell you a glimpse of what happens after that, I'd like to read some verses from the prophet Zechariah, chapter 14, verse 2. The day of the Lord is coming. I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. The city will be captured, the houses ransacked, and the women raped. Half of the city will go into exile, but the rest of the people will not be taken from the city. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. On that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, forming a great valley, with half of the mountain moving north and half moving south. You will flee by my mountain valley, for it will extend to Azel. You will flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him. On that day there will be no light, no cold or frost. It will be a unique day, without daytime or nighttime, a day known to the Lord. When evening comes, there will be light. On that day, living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half to the eastern sea and half to the western sea, in summer and in winter. And finally it says, the Lord will be king over the whole earth. On that day there will be one Lord, and his name the only name. I trust you sense from what we've read that whilst on the one hand there's a very serious note to what Jesus says, on the other there is an extraordinary promise of glory for those who are called to be with Christ, and also an indication that no matter how much we may fear the desolation of the world through our climate change or other plagues, the Lord is coming and he will be reigning on this earth, as it says in Zechariah, and he will be glorified in this world, and there will be a period of great blessing before this world is finally wrapped up, so to speak, and eternity follows. And so in this passage, I first of all wanted to remind ourselves that there's a way in which we can live through both the present crisis and what may lay ahead for us before Jesus returns. And that way is to accept what Jesus says, that the pattern of our lives as Christians is we may suffer now, be persecuted and suffer for our faith, but the glory will follow. And during that period, Jesus will be building his church, both by sharing the gospel in the power of the Spirit, but also by refining us, developing our character through tests and trials. And Paul describes this sort of way of living when he writes to the Philippians, I think it is, and he says, look, I count everything but loss for the sake of knowing the surpassing greatness of Jesus Christ. And my desire is to be more like him and to follow in his footsteps and to share in his sufferings, so that by some means I might attain the resurrection. And so I see a picture of a way of living which is just the opposite to our selfish way of living, which is to have as good a life as possible here, even if the consequences are rejection and condemnation in the future. Instead of that, we look to be prepared to be a part of the Jesus family, which expresses God's sacrificial love in these days and is not afraid to suffer for him, knowing that his Spirit is with us. Jesus says, if you suffer, you'll be blessed. And so this is something that I just felt I wanted to share, because I have to say in my life I've been very little persecuted. But the fact is we need to be ready for what may lie ahead. The other thing is that when we come to understanding when Jesus will come back, I'm taking the words of Jesus as indicating that all these 4 signs will occur before he comes. And so we are told here in verse 15 that there will come a time when an evil power will be standing in the temple in Jerusalem, committing abominable acts. And that, I believe, will be the culmination of a period during which the world slides into increasing wickedness. Maybe this will be the global Antichrist, which is spoken of in Revelation, where you have the beast and the false prophet, and you have a ruling come in that unless you accept the mark of the beast, you will not be able to trade, which would mean acute suffering for any believers then on the earth. But whilst we may suffer at the hands of the forces of evil, I believe that we will be protected from God's punishments, which will fall upon the world at that time, according to Revelation, because this Antichrist will deceive the peoples of the world. It isn't that he's against Jesus, he's pretending to be a global leader like Jesus who will bring peace to the world. And for the sake of peace, religions will unite. There will be an appeal to Christians to unite with Jews and